It's recording. Were we not recording the whole time?
Seems like every road you're on is hit a dead end. There is hope. Let me show.
All right, everybody, to our 3 listeners so far, welcome back to our podcast. If you don't know who we are, we're Ellie and Zach. We're a brother-sister duo that talks about abuse in our family, abuse in the Christian realm, and kind of just how it all affects us. And so we are fortunate to have an awesome guest with us. We have Alice Mills. So for any of you who aren't visually watching us, you're just listening to us on Spotify, we have Alice Mills. She is the author of Poema Chronicles. She is someone who we've referenced a few times already on our podcast, who has been very instrumental just in the realm of healing. She's been very instrumental to me and my healing journey. She's also helped Ellie a few times through some stuff that we've had to navigate at certain points in our lives. And we're just very honored that we are here and we're able to get our schedules to align and talk with someone who is a great warrior for Christ and has a passion for restoration. So Alice, welcome to our podcast, our humble podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
And I see you have a nice little furry friend in the background.
Yes, that's Kevin, my rag doll.
Well, we're glad that Kevin is here as well. So our setup is going to be a little bit different, everybody. We're kind of recording on Zoom. And so there's going to be some flukes and some bells and whistles here that we're going to have to do. But in about a half hour, we're going to take a little break so we can kind of switch to another meeting conference so that we can continue recording. So it'll be a little bit different, but bear with us. We're learning as we go. So Alice, when we kind of talked about doing this with you, you and I kind of came to a consensus of what we'd be talking about. And the initial idea was family trauma, and that's so broad, but also so specific at the same time. And for Ellie and I, we are 2 siblings who were abused differently from the same abuser. For me, it was onslaught. I was made to be like a black sheep, evil child. My sister was more on the brainwashing side. So for us, we had the same abuser who had 2 separate styles depending on the individual and depending on who was friend, who was foe. And so naturally, that causes us to see history differently. It causes us to see our abuse differently. Our takeaways are obviously different, and that's what Ellie and I have discussed in our podcast thoroughly. So that's kind of the gunk that we come with, and that's kind of the nature that we battle with even today, post healing and everything. And you're someone who has, based off of our talks and based off of our experiences together in your blog, you have a wide variety of abuse that incorporates the family and not, so tell us a little about your story. Tell us a little bit about you and the things that you've seen and the takeaways as a Christian, just talk.
Well, I was kind of, I married super young, and it was to what I didn't have the language at the time, but it was a narcissist that I married. And it was, back in the 80s, people didn't really have this kind of language or understanding of what was going on. And my parents were as naive as I was, because if your heart isn't, all theological discussions of depravity aside, if your heart isn't evil or isn't evilly disposed towards people, you assume that others are not evilly disposed towards you. And so one of the, I think, big myths of marrying someone who's a narcissist is that you are, I guess, they use so many of their wiles in order to draw you into this relationship. But it actually, what makes you vulnerable to a narcissist, I think, and it was true to a certain extent, to a large extent, I think, for me, which is that you learn from early on as a child to not tell yourself the truth. You learn to gaslight yourself. And so for me, it was, I was a highly sensitive kid, and I took what people said very literally. I took it very seriously. So I believed whatever it was that people told me. So if people said, oh, it's not that bad, I thought to myself, oh, it's really not that bad. So by the time I married John, I was thoroughly well versed in not listening to myself. Right. And I was really good at dissociating myself from any real emotions. So when I married him, he was 18, I was 17, and he went through a major depression, and then his behavior got gradually more and more abusive. And then it was kind of interesting because he went through this kind of spiritual transformation. At least that's what it looked like. I finally got up the courage to leave him. And he said that God had pulled him over from the truck and pulled him out onto the road and really let him have it. And he was changed and super spiritual for a few months. And that was a card that he would play over and over again. And in fact, he still plays it with his parents now, which is that if I can simulate a spiritual awakening, then people are going to fall for it again. And so it was just a cycle that went around and around and around. And eventually we moved to Kentucky. We're very, very isolated, which is another playbook in the narcissist play where they want to separate you from family and friends. And that was when I started to get really serious about the Lord. I was always a Christian, but there's a difference between being a Christian and being a follower of Christ. Like I have a feeling that when that scripture that says, Lord, we did all these things in your name. And he's like, I don't know you. Mm-hmm. I think that's what it is it's an issue of lordship. Because Christians, we kind of go our own way and we do our own thing, thinking that we're doing the Christian thing, but we're not dedicating ourselves to obeying Jesus in an individual personal relationship. And that was when I began to understand what that looked like. And he was the one who set me free, despite the fact that a lot of pastors and stuff like that really were, divorce or marriage is a bit of an idol, I think, in our church, in the Christian church these days, where you must stay married at all costs, even if it costs you your life. But at least that was, I think, the advice that I got from some pastors. But, and this is one of my favorite stories. This was, I think, the beginning of my real awakening to the fact that this is not what God had for me, which is I had emergency gallbladder surgery to remove some gallstones. And I had driven myself to the hospital in the middle of an attack. And it was the day after surgery. He didn't come at all to see how I was doing. And I had visited a church one time. And the pastor and his wife heard that I was in the hospital, and they came and visited me. And her name was Laverne, and she looked at me and she said, I've never done this before, but if you ever need a place to stay, the Lord has said to me that I must let you and your children come stay with us. And that very day, I drove myself home from the hospital, and I had gotten a check from my in-laws for my birthday, and I spent it on groceries. And he had gotten infuriated about that and kicked me out with the kids. And so that very day I had a place to stay and recover from surgery, And so it's like, that was when I began to realize, the Lord is the Lord is very, very intimately engaged with people who are attempting to follow him despite what is going on in their abusive situation in their life. And it took a while. It took a few rounds, but we eventually broke free, and that in itself is a miracle. So very few women do break free, and once I was gone, the abuse that occurred while I was there towards the kids from his father towards the kids from him to the kids, there are still revelations that come out, and it's been 25 years since I lived with them. So expect it to be a long journey of discovering just how bad it was. And so whenever someone says to you, it wasn't so bad. It's not so bad. No, it is. It is that bad. It's that bad.
I think the term, sorry, Zach.
Sorry. Go for it.
Sorry to interject. I think the term "it's not so bad" is such an overused statement, like how today's generations somewhat overuse the term narcissist. People say narcissist, and it's not even related to mental disease of some sort. But I consider, Zach and I have spoken about our mother and about her position in the marriage and the healing portion of her and I in my awakening, so to speak. And I can definitely see the term "it's not that bad" being that self-gaslighting moment to just survive. And if you speak to our mom, particularly in my story and my awakening, she goes back to the point of, if I decided to divorce him when our daughter was younger, I would have never gotten the awakening that I have now and the relationship where I'm at with my daughter. So it's a blessing and a curse, that statement of "it's not that bad," when it comes into, is it really not that bad, or are we just trying to tell ourselves that in order to survive to the next milestone that we need to get to?
It's so hard to learn how to tell the truth, because in order to tell the truth, you have to actually know what the truth is.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many layers in our own minds that want to protect us and keep us alive, that will filter the truth so that we don't have to look at the horror of whatever it is, right? Yeah. But the fact that Jesus went to hell is one thing that gives me so much hope, because he went to hell, and that means that he saw the full horror of everything, right? The worst of the worst. And he went to hell in a way so that I didn't have to, but he also went so that I could look at the full horror of everything, but I don't have to look at it alone.
And that's where God shows up as the comforter, and the one who sees, and the one who protects, and the one who provides. He's seen it all, and so he knows how to comfort us because he's been through it all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and you're kind of piggybacking on something both you, Alice, and Ellie mentioned. I think probably a few podcast episodes ago between Ellie and I quoted a part of one of your blog posts, which ironically, it's never ironic, it's always God's amazing timing and orchestration, but I think it was the one of the article, 4 Ways We Gaslight Ourselves After Abuse. And it's one thing that I've told Ellie before we recorded, but I mentioned it in one of our recordings, where one of the awakening points for me to combat the truth and accept the truth was one of your excerpts, which was having to admit that someone who was supposed to love you tried to tear you apart piece by piece hurts.
Yeah.
And having to believe that and accept that requires you to do an inventory of everything. It causes you to question everything. And if you're in our modern day age where you have a job and you have a spouse and you have all these responsibilities, it's so easy to not have to go there, but our spirit, I always feel like once our spirit knows, it becomes a wrestling match, because our brain and heart might try to get us to look away, but our spirit has been activated. And it's also one of the weird in a cool way of just how God has made us, of once the truth has been revealed, you have to deal with it, right? But we fight so hard to not have to, and it's so easy to realize someone unhealthy within the first month that you've met someone in comparison to 20 years plus of abuse, gaslighting, revisionist history and everything, because you just don't know any better. And if the people around you are telling you it's not that big of a deal, this is normal, God wants you to be here, if God wanted you to divorce, he would have told you. There's so many ways that even when we try to go out for support, we're left alone. I remember not really talking about abuse here, but not long ago, I had a conversation with Ellie on the phone where we were just talking about walking in our gifting. And I remember one time I was part of a group where I was being spiritually attacked demonically. I was having demons wake me up in the middle of the night, claw at me. It was not a fun experience, but I was surrounded by a lot of Reformed Christians who were not intact with the spiritual side.
Yeah.
And the Holy Spirit told me, I want you to share this in your group when we're going around. How can I be praying for you? And I felt so alone, because when I admitted it and I talked about it, people just jumped over it and went straight to, well, have you given it to God? Or we'll be praying for you. And it's like no one sat in that with me. And so when it comes to abuse, when we have the bravery to admit it, not just to ourselves, but have the courage to admit it to someone that we trust, and it's not reciprocated, it's not listened to, it's not validated, it feels so isolating. And so I wonder, in your journey, were there moments where you tried to reach out and it felt isolating because either people didn't give it credence, or they just told you to bear with it because that's what a good Christian wife would do?
Oh yeah. I think that, when you go through really severe abuse and honestly, life with a narcissist, even if they didn't beat you, it's severe abuse. And that's something that is sort of glossed over. You become Frodo after he drops off the ring, right? Like, he's never the same. He can't fully integrate. There's always a part of him that's going to be alone, because he has had to face evil on a level that the majority of people either don't or won't. And there are benefits and drawbacks to this. So the drawback is that there's a part of me that stands apart from a lot of my family. It's just very difficult to integrate with them, because I know things that they don't know, and I don't know how to unknow them, right? And so I often feel like a little bit of like Frodo while everyone's playing, and he's kind of staring pensively into his pint of ale. But the benefit to it is that you gain a courage that you didn't know that you had. And so twice now I have encountered one at a college I was teaching at, and one at a church I was going to in Alaska, where the pastor or my boss at the school were full-blown narcissists, full-blown. And one was just better at hiding it than the other. And I was able to stand up. I stood up for what was right at Georgia, and then in Georgia, and then the other one. What was interesting was that I witnessed them do something horrific to one of their best church members, and of everyone in the church, they all knew what had happened, and they'd all seen it before, and none of them stood with her except for me. Even her best friends, even that they knew what had happened, they gaslighted themselves, and it was fascinating. But once you've been through that experience, then you know that that you can face the dragon, and that you have to face the dragon, that you must. It's a very serious business to allow evil to go unchecked and to say nothing. And the vast majority of us do. You know, I certainly did while I was married to John. I let evil pass over because I was living at that peace at all costs thing. I was trying to be, at peace and try to make everything okay and taking on things that shouldn't be mine. So that is one benefit, because then you become a little bit more, if you heal, if you face it, you become a narcissist detector. If you do not face it, if you do not choose a healing journey, then you will simply repeat the pattern. So
yeah, no, and that's something. Sorry, your door just opened.
A different cat
walked in.
Oh, there's another cat.
Yes, this is Radagast. I have 5.
Can we
cats.
see the kitty? Where'd the kitty go?
He's really shy around people, but he doesn't
goodness.
notice. He doesn't notice people on screen, which is really funny. I think he thinks it's just TV.
Oh.
But he was. I rescued him. He was frozen to the ice underneath a truck in Alaska, and so he was one of my first rescues when I fostered during the pandemic. So,
Wow.
Well, he's beautiful.
he is. He's such a gorgeous boy.
I love that.
If I can
I know
segue
cats are
back,
hard, so.
if I can segue back into what we were just discussing, I think there's power in truth that people are not recognizing in today's day and age. That it's so surface level that our words have meaning, let alone our truth has the power to be able to manipulate how we navigate the world. And I have found myself, since interacting with our abuser and gone through this healing journey and spiritual breakthroughs, and even more so now I'm going through next steps into my careers, that's affected me to look back at, I could have learned this at a younger age, but I'm learning it now, so we're trajecting in that area. That now that the experience has happened and now I know what I know, interactions with people have been especially with a close friend of mine, it's been you got to talk about the truth. You can't beat around the bush. You can't just, oh, well, things are fine. Things are fine. No, it's not. You just told me the other week that X, Y, and Z happened. And you're lying to yourself. And I love you too much to lie to yourself right now, because I know what I know. And if God's a good God, he's going to break through a similar story for you too, if you're willing to admit it. And it's trivial in today's day and age, because we have devices, we have our phones, we have laptops, we have TVs, we have streaming, we have these things that are distractions into us being able to navigate and actually experience the truth and actually experience breakthroughs and to see outside of the distractions of what evil is going on, to be able to get us away from Lord's truth. And I want to speak into this too. We have listeners into our podcast who don't have a relationship with the Lord, and what we're talking about is a lot of information. It's scary. It's, wait, around every corner there's evil happening? Yes. Every single distraction, every single thing, every single up to a headache or a body ache of some sort. It is some sort of spirit that's trying to attack us day in and day out, because at the end of the day, truth has power.
It does. It doesn't. And, I was thinking about what you said, Zach, about those dreams, and Spencer and I have spent a lot of time listening to Derek Prince. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he has a lot of sermons on YouTube, and they just are. He's been. I think he died about 20 years ago, but he was really a pioneer in deliverance. And he went going through the New Testament. He said that, and he was like a scholar in Hebrew and Greek. He said the word possession is a really bad translation. That it's not possession, it's demonization. People get demonized. And Christians and non-Christians alike. But the thing that prevents Christians from being able to be free is a lack of humility, because it takes it takes a lot of humility to say, hey, I'm being afflicted by this, because people's first response is, well, you have sin in your life. You've done something to deserve this, right? And that's not. Sometimes there are openings that are generational. Sometimes there are openings just because of places that you walked, you know, and you know what I mean. Like the whole spiritual world, people think of it as very black and white and one dimensional, angels and demons. But the truth is that it is as varied as creation here, right? It's very, very varied. It's very complex, and so. When you confess that to people, I imagine it just freaked them all out, because they see it through the eyes of kind of this Christian superstition, right? And not as in, oh, okay, this is something that is typical of a Christian's walk, that you will have to face demonic attack. And in fact, if you have no demonic attack in your life, then you are no threat to the devil.
Nope.
So, you know, it's exactly the opposite.
No, and in fact, I remember when I won't name the institution of where I attended and where you taught, where you and I met, but when I remember one of the first times you and I interacted, it's funny when I left, because I call my leaving for college an escape, you know, because I really did. I moved 300 plus miles away from home. No one knew me, new place, new environment. And that's where my spiritual gifts really kicked in. And I got gift of prophecy, and I got discernment of evil spirits. And I remember one of the first times you and I kind of talked about that. You were like, oh, you know, that's interesting, because I can sense sometimes when angels are around. It's this wonderful warmth on my back, and I'm like, well, that's great, because I got the demons, and it's like a chill down my spine. Can we trade? Because this one sucks, you know. It's interesting because for one, I already have. It's interesting for those who are already more spiritually inclined, more supernaturally inclined. It's just a different part of the body of Christ. But also just within the confines of healing. Ellie and I have talked about this recently, where it can get so exhausting when you've done the work, when you've done the healing, when you've had to remove the scales off of your eyes and get the thorns out of your flesh, and you're walking on this narrow road. It becomes very apparent where other people are at when you interact with them, whether or not they're able to connect with you or go, oh, I totally understand, I've been there myself, or if there's just like this blockade that when people just aren't willing to go there, it can feel so isolating in the healing process, because not everyone is there, and it's so hard to find community around you to uplift you, build you up, supports, even just to be validated. You know, something as so simplistic as being validated can be a rarity in the faith, and we become so cerebral, and we become so knowledge based and dominating in that, and there's no room for the Holy Spirit to move. And so, you know, it can be like you talked just recently when you spoke about it. It's a catch-22. You know, you realize that there's places where you don't fit in, but then you also can become that instrument when it comes before you to interact, intervene, and help those of which you've, you know,
and it's
a situation.
It's difficult too, because, you know, I get women who contact me all the time and they want advice, and I've just sort of simplified it down to, are you willing to admit that this person who has done these terrible things to you wishes to destroy you? And if you are not ready to admit that, and admit that they are your enemy because of whatever, the love bombing or whatever, because of the cycle that you're in, if you're not willing to admit that, you are not ready to leave. And they always, it hurts me to say that to them, but it hurts them to hear it too, because it's like that's the ugly truth that must be faced, is that there are people who enjoy and hurting you, and it's not even necessarily a, you know, it's cruel, yes, but sometimes it's just because a narcissist is like a 2-year-old. A 2-year-olds are frustrating, right? They make you feel so frustrated, like you have no idea what to do. Well, that's it. What they've done is they've successfully reproduced their emotion inside of you, right? That's how the only way that they can communicate. Well, the narcissist stuck in that 2-year-old phase, he or she does the same thing. They produce in you that same shame, helplessness, disgust, self-loathing, fear, whatever it is. They produce it in you because they are no longer able to feel and express it normally. And so so whatever their motivation in doing it, the result is something that is truly horrific to live through, right? It's just horrific to live through because you're feeling someone else's hell all the time.
No, you're right. I mean, it's something that Ellie and I, in one of, I can't remember if it was our last podcast episode that we published or the one before.
Yeah.
We've talked about, because our abuse was so different. Like, I don't know what it's like to be brainwashed. I know what it's like to be made enemy number one on day one, right? She doesn't necessarily know what that looks like, or the ramifications that it had on me for me to have the positions that I do, and vice versa. I don't know what it's like to believe for X amount of years that your abuser was the healthy one and the good guy, and then have to unravel that it was all a lie, And one of the things that I mentioned, like, it is a full-time job to abuse somebody, because you have to choose one to not live in reality, to not live in the truth, and you have to fight so hard to make your internal chaos the reality. And worse for us, now split that off and create one reality for one group in the family, and then another on the other side of the family. And it's like, either way you split it out, this isn't ignorance, this isn't I didn't know any better, this is just full-on intentionality. Whether or not you want to go there and say this was because he enjoyed it, or this is because he's just so damaged, it really doesn't matter. It was intentional, and there's no want or desire for that abuser to change. They want to be in that, and that's where you kind of have to battle that and go, so they're telling me behaviors and language, what are they telling me? And that is so hard. That is so hard.
It really is.
I think one thing I want to mention in this too, something very profound that Zach had mentioned in an episode, is that along with the same thought he was mentioning, our abuser chose to kill, steal, and destroy our childhood, our growth, our development to be a young man, a young woman in Christ. He was a pastor. I know now today he actually is going to a church right now. And in my head, I'm thinking of he's just going to continue his schemes and try to prove to other people he's this great, loving guy. I don't know why I don't have a relationship with my 2 kids of 3 and my ex-wife and all these things. He's going to continue the story because he needs someone to believe his story for him to continue navigating the life that he has. All this to say, he chose. And the superficial, well, he only have one dad, why won't you forgiven him? He chose to do this, not just to me, but to my older brother, to my younger brother, unknown to my younger brother's knowledge. He chose to treat my mother and neglect and financial abuse and all these other different versions of abuse. He chose to do this time and time and time and time and time again for upwards 30 years now. It's not a mistake, and I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to pause because we're at this lovely cadence in this recording that it is now going to interrupt us in the middle of the recording. So we're going to take a pause on this. We're going to hold a thought into this, and we're going to have a lovely transition into the next recording here. So consider this done.
Okay, sounds good.
Alrighty, here we are. We're back. Technology is amazing. While we were gone, Alice, I think a great segue for us to pan our attention to is there's a difference between having a bad day and you just slept wrong, you didn't eat enough or something, and an abuser who is intentionally making you the enemy at all costs. Can we have distinct descriptions of that? Because I know that we have some listeners who are in a season that can't tell the difference, don't know what that actually looks like, or newer listeners, or maybe we do have folks who already know the definition, but I want to bring some clarity in that area, if you can speak into that.
Yeah, I think that there's two ways to tell, I think, if you are with someone who is an abuser versus someone who has poor relationship skills and is a jerk on occasion, which is all of us on at some point, right? So the number one, I think, indicator of an abuser is they do not respect any boundaries. And honestly, you can tell this so quickly. Say no to them one time and see what are they willing to do to jump over your no. Is it coercion? Is it manipulation? Is it anger? Is it guilting? Is it whatever it is? If someone refuses to listen to your no, then they really are not. They don't see you as a person. Right? They don't see you as an individual with your own agency. They see you as an extension of themselves and getting what they want. Two, I think, is a lack of empathy. Someone who loves you, cares about what you're going through. But like my ex-husband who wouldn't go with me to the hospital, there was an utter lack of empathy in him for other people. And this one takes a little bit longer, I think, but it's really, if you listen to the way that they talk about other people, you can often discern a lack of agency or a lack of empathy. And the other thing that took me a long time to realize was, and this is really subtle, and this is why it's so important that we don't gaslight our children into distrusting their feelings. It's not that we have to believe everything our feelings say to us, but we are feeling that way for a reason, and that's what needs to be explored. I could not locate a moment that I felt in love with my ex-husband. He loved me, and so I assumed that was what was supposed to happen, or he acted like he loved me. And there was never this deep emotional pull. There was a lot of agony, a lot of all this stuff. But the reason why, and my children have reported this as well, which is that they have almost no feelings for him. I mean, they get mad at him or things like that, but they have no deep feelings of love for their father. And the reason for this is because he has no deep feelings of love for anyone. You cannot, if you are in a relationship with someone and you find yourself just sort of numb or feeling nothing, that you are mirroring what it is that they are feeling towards you. Does that make sense? And it's so subtle. So if you don't trust yourself enough to ask yourself, why do I feel nothing towards this person who is acting as if we're deeply in love? And I enjoy the attention so much, he's love bombing me, and I know I should be feeling these things, then you have to learn how to take a step back and say, what do I really feel towards this person? And then admit, if there's nothing there on their side either, chances are.
It's very profound.
I feel like, Belly, I'll let you, I'm gonna use you as an example here.
Okay.
I'm gonna piggyback off of it, because I think what Alice said was so profound. I remember when Ellie had moved back from Texas back to California. She wasn't living with me at the time, but she would frequent my house and we would talk, and she was trying to navigate coming to a realization from God that her life was not as accurate as she thought it was. Her father was an abuser, and now she's going to be living with him, living in the home, because of her financial situation and everything. And I remember Ellie once came over and we were talking briefly of just her trying to navigate this, of her going like, look, I'm in therapy, I know the truth, and I have a hope that things will be different and better, but I'm really, it can go one way or the other. It's like a metronome. It can be over here one day, it can be over here one day. And I remember telling her, look, if he starts treating you better, but he's treating me and our mother the same way, is that okay for you? Because I know your want is to go back to the way that your nervous system remembers how things work, and there's nothing wrong in that. But if your father changes how he treats you, right? Because at this point he was treating her different. He was starting to deem her problematic, right? Whereas before that wasn't the case. She was a good one. Now she's bad. And I remember telling her, like, look, doesn't this indicate that if he's treating your mother and I like we're the evil ones, but he's treating you better, are you okay with that reality? Because you're always going to know, you're going to have this relationship with your father, but you're always going to know in the back of your head that he's abusing her.
Yeah.
And no offense to Ellie at the time, no offense to the therapy that she was getting, but I felt like I was asking questions that she really wasn't getting anywhere else, and I felt bad sometimes because I was like, sorry to send you off in a depressive state, but these are some serious questions here. Ellie, please, that means that was your story. And,
yeah.
You know, your agency there. Speak to that, because I felt like that was really profound for you and your
To be completely honest, I don't remember that conversation, but it sounds very true that to be happening. I'll answer it by piggyback off of what Alice was speaking into as you were defining who a narcissist is and what that abuse is and what that does to you. I had honestly a realization of I already have an understanding. I just was goody two shoes. I did whatever everyone wanted from me because that's what will make sure that I keep the peace, you know, and that just bled into every single nook and cranny when it came into school, career, relationships, and that's no good. But it gave further clarity into back then to what Zach, the story that you were bringing up, that was almost 3 years ago, and I didn't know how to read my emotions, my thoughts, and my stance of who I am. And to be perfectly honest, I probably was still very emotionally chaotic, and I didn't know how to find me. And that's so cliche, but it's so true that the relationship with my abuser and I was that he was my hero, but I needed to serve him in order for him to continue to be the hero, and put away my emotions, put away my wishes and wants, and keep that emotional, I'm 5 years old and he's the hero. So that princess era or superhero era was always alive up to 25 years old. Here I am, I'm going against my father, and now somehow I'm the evil one. But it was because I'm not a princess anymore. I am not even in this fairy tale anymore. I have truth that God has revealed, and you're actually this double-faced masked person who's a monster at the end of it. So to come into that reality, it's kind of, what was the term? Transcended? Is that the word? I've grown exponentially in this short period to fully be aware of. 3 years ago, I didn't know how to feel my emotions. 3 years ago, I didn't know how to even know what my emotions were. So it brings clarity into realizing in my past self, I just did whatever I could to keep the peace of any relationship because I was taught and trained to just be a mirror to my abuser. And it's wild, although it's not a relationship that where it's a husband and wife duo, but to see that narcissist down to his own lineage is wanting this extension of you're gonna obey me and idolize him. And it's so consuming of the soul to just take over you. So anyway, it went off sidetrack than I intentionally meant to, but it's so wild to see how emotionally invasive it is. I don't know, Alice, if you have anything into that.
It's the fights. In the Bible, you have over and over again this fight between tyranny and freedom. And we experience tyranny and freedom in every arena of our lives, right? So tyranny actually looks good sometimes, right? I mean, I think that people who want to be taken care of. So when the Hebrews were in Egypt, at least they were fed. They were miserable, but they were fed. They didn't, they had shelter and they had a place. And of course, they didn't have an identity. They didn't have any agency, but they were taken care of. And so then when you choose freedom, then what you are doing is you are exposing yourself to death, right? So what you experience when you see what's true, when you decide to look at what's true, you have no idea what's going to happen. You have no idea the ramifications of it, and you are risking serious death. And of course, the Hebrews risked death. There they were at the Red Sea. There they were in the wilderness. Right? They had to face death over and over again because that's what truth will do. Is it will put you. It makes you look at it. Makes you look at what is actually going on and what's real. And then eventually they achieved freedom. Right, which is I've kind of been shocked to discover that many people don't want, which is why they will choose the tyrannical system of government, right, or a cult or an abusive relationship, because at least you know what you got. You have no idea what's waiting out there with freedom, and it could kill you, right? At least that's what your nervous system is going to tell you. Right. So you guys have chosen not to be in that tyranny, and you will find that a dislike and a inability to remain in tyrannical situations will follow you.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think, not long ago, I heard a sermon for one of the first times on why people are uncomfortable being healed. And it's primarily talking about the Gospel of John and the lame man by the healing well who couldn't crawl his way for 40 plus years, and Jesus comes up to him and says, "Do you want to be healed?" And the man gave every reason for why healing is not an option. I think a lot of times in the faith, we take on this mantra, this creed that the wrath that we are experiencing is because it's God working. And I feel like you have to be very careful with that, because while I do believe in trials and tribulations, there's a difference between something that God is having you walk through and is preparing you to walk through versus just outright tyranny that you're experiencing for no reason.
Oh yeah.
I feel like a lot of times I've known people who have used the Bible as a reason. They use scriptures like, "Oh, this is a thorn in my flesh. I'm just supposed to deal with this." And I've had to get to a point where I tell people, look, if you want to use God's word to curse yourself, you can. But if you're gonna speak something like that over yourself, you need to be very certain that that's what God is saying. Because if you're gonna use God as a reason for why you can't be free, then you are gridlocking the Lord from freedom that He's offering. And it's us choosing that, unbeknownst, whether or not we consciously know that or not is irrelevant. There's something in us that has come up with the solution that no, we're going to choose the tyranny, we're going to choose the abuse over this freedom, and it's so disheartening to watch that. You're a teacher, so it's like watching your student come so close to the answer. All the gears are working, and the synapse in the brain are almost about to make a connection, and they just give up. And you're just like, okay, well, all right. And that's one of the things I wanted to bring up here. I remember I want to, if we can, talk briefly about what it's like to walk in freedom, and having to let other people experience that for themselves and not interject as like a savior. I remember when my sister and my mom came to live with me because the abuse chapter in their lives was finally coming to an end. I kind of started it, and they were subsequently leaving it. And you and I, when I was 17, is when I started my healing journey with you. I won't age myself here, but that was more than 10 plus years ago. And here's my sister and my mom who are finally walking away. Not that they didn't recognize it as abuse, but their no was finally established. And I had, in my own house, I had to go like, okay, I'm at this level, they're at this level, they're still walking through this, but how do I navigate this? Because I feel like I have the answers for them, or I feel like I have the terminology or whatever it might be, but it's like you're having to allow people to go on their journey, not alone, but between them and God. And it's so hard to not want to intervene and go, no, wait, no, come over here, you're getting off track. It's complicated because you're doing it out of love, but at the same time, it's kind of like, you also don't want to get in the way of the testimony for that person. So it's like, have you ever experienced that? I'm sure you probably have with your children.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I experience it with my adult children all the time. I suppose I recently read a book and I can't remember the name of it. I can get it for you. I've been reading some Watchman Nee, and do you know who he was? He was a Chinese evangelist who was in a Chinese prison for over 20 years. And he is fascinating to read him because there are none of the trappings of American Christianity. And I'd suggest starting with the normal Christian life. But he wrote this book, and it was about how the Lord has to break your outer man, because the inner man is where his life is, and the outer man is very powerful. Right? It's very, it knows the answers. We rely so much on our outer man, our soul, our mind, our bodies, and, but it also absolutely prevents God's life from working from within us outwardly, because in our own flesh, in that outer man, there is nothing good that can come. And so I've learned that all of my good ideas about what people want, you know what I mean? It's like I have tried to train various people in inner healing who really want to do it. And many of them cannot get past that outer man, that the right answer phase. So you'll have someone in a very painful position, which is sacred ground, and you'll ask them, well, what is Jesus saying to you? And they can't necessarily hear what Jesus is saying to them. There's something in the way, and you have to figure out what's in the way, and you have to help them figure out what's in the way. And you're looking for wrong answers. Actually, you're not looking for the right answers, and because the wrong answers are the lies that keep them where they are at. But in a person who is working with their outer man, they're like, oh, I know the answer. You're supposed to say this. And they're waiting for you to say the right answer. But what you're doing is you're derailing their healing the minute you do that. And so I've learned that I can handle other people's. I can handle their misery. I can handle their sorrows and their terrible situations from the stance of my inner man. From the stance of my spirit. My soul cannot. My soul cannot handle the sorrow. My soul cannot handle the burden. And I will not produce life in them if I'm coming at them from a soulish position. And so, and the Lord has taken me through various, if you give him permission to, he will break the outer man, and you will lose.
Yeah.
You will lose your pride. You will lose your things. You will lose your status. You will lose everything. And then when he gives it back to you, it's going to be in that position of the inner man. And the things that you've lost, you don't even care about anymore. Not in the same way. It's a continual shedding. So I guess I know that's a kind of a way roundabout answer, but it's the life that we live in the spirit. To live is Christ, to die is gain. To live is Christ, to live in the spirit is to live in Christ. And everything else is loss. Everything else is temporary. And so in interacting with people going through that journey, the only power that you have is whatever the Lord inspires in you. And be terrified to do anything else but what the Lord specifically directs you, because you will only muddy it or make it worse. It's not ever the right thing. And it's so hard because you want to help people. You love them. You love them so much, and you want to go in and you want to fix it. And you can't.
Well, and I was gonna ask, so as someone who, such as yourself or anybody listening to our conversation that will post later, who has done the work, who does want to help other people, wants to take some part in a healing ministry or revelation ministry, whatever have you, what are some great steps that you have learned in your journey through this? Because I'm not. I mean, Alice knows this. Usually, I'm the person I'm like the traffic guy. I find the people and I send them to Alice, not because I can't necessarily do it, but that's not necessarily my gifting. If the Lord wanted me to, I believe wholeheartedly that He could. But like, what is a way where you're existing, and like, what is a way to engage like that? Because like, what is your recipe for success of walking in the giftings that God has given you and partaking, or having a moment to attempt to partake? Because I've talked about it in our earlier podcast, but you sought me out as a student. Actually, God just told you. You didn't seek me out. God just told you. It wasn't me necessarily searching for answers. But there obviously must have been something in obedience where you said, okay, Lord, I'm just going to go do this, and it's going to work. What is your recipe for success there? What have you learned along the years that has allowed you to walk in what you know, and have that freedom to go and partner?
Two things. One is that I got trained in everything I could get trained in. And I didn't get trained to help other people. I got trained because I wanted to know for myself. Right. And so I still use all of the inner healing techniques I've ever used. I use on myself daily. You know what I mean? And it's because the inner healing techniques are not really, they're really tools for the transformation of the mind. They're ways to take every thought captive. Right. And so it's a way of living. And so that has been, and that's not to say that there's not times when I've really needed other people to do them with me. You can't do it all by yourself, but that's the benefit of getting trained and going to those kinds of conferences and stuff like that, is that there's always an opportunity for someone to practice on you. The other thing I suppose is that I don't spend a lot of time thinking about whether or not I'm supposed to talk to this person or that person. I just, the more in touch with your spirit that you get, the more you recognize that deep nudge, and I love that deep nudge, and I hate it. Because I never know. It's like it can put you in, obeying him can put you in some awkward situations, and that where you look at other people's pain, and that can be very difficult. I remember being in the middle of Wisconsin, and there was this teenage girl sitting in a pizza parlor, and for all intents and purposes, it just looked like a normal scene. And the Lord told me, I want you to go up to that girl, and And I want you to tell her that I saw. It still makes me cry to think about it. That he had seen what had been done to her. And he would avenge her. I'm like, I don't want to do that. But I did. And she said, she started to weep. And she said, I think I have a tiny bit of hope. You know? So if you open yourself up, it's at a cost.
Yeah.
It will cost you. And so you just have to ask yourself, are you willing to pay that cost? And is the Lord wanting you to pay it with this person at this time? And if not, don't go there. Do not go there. I had an experience with a woman who found me at through my blog, and I spent like months praying with her, and she was suicidal, very suicidal, and she could never renounce anything. She could never acknowledge Jesus because she was too afraid, she said. So I finally sent her over to a friend of mine who runs Minding the Truth Ministries, and because she was looking in Europe to where she could possibly, because the euthanasia was allowed there, and she wanted to die that way. And I just was like, this is above my pay grade. I wasn't able to help her the first time, and I tried so hard. And he called me up and he said, you know what, she's a distraction. She has no intention of acknowledging Jesus. She will not acknowledge him. And if someone will not acknowledge Jesus, there's nothing that you can do for them. And he said, and so I asked the Lord, and he's like, if you'd asked me, I would have told you. But I just assumed that I knew what was the right thing for her. And, you know, of course, you want to help someone who's suicidal, right? Everything in you is like, oh, we don't want anyone to commit suicide. And that was a particular weakness for me, since we'd had some suicide in Spencer's family. And, you know, it's like, you know how painful it is. But as ill as she was mentally, that she was sent by the enemy to be a painful distraction. So you really have to learn how to discern when it's him and when it's not. And you'll make mistakes, but you get credit for trying to obey him, even if you fail.
I want to piggyback on what Allison that you just said. That it was a distraction. At this point in my life, between me and Ellie, I won't speak for Ellie, I'll just speak for myself. But when it comes to our abuser, I don't have any hate or contempt or anger in my heart. But I've come to a position in my life where, when it comes to abusive people, my perspective is, look, I don't want for you. I'm not going to pray for you if you don't want to for yourself. If you don't want freedom, then I don't want freedom. And I don't know if that's a Christian nihilistic perspective, but it looks very different than the whole love your enemies, pray for your enemies scripture verses that are out there. And I have felt that our abuser has been a distraction. Our abuser was put in our lives to derail us. I don't know if that's true, but at this point in time, that is one of my beliefs, that where I even tell myself, if only he just wasn't here, we could be free, we could go about our lives, we could walk in our calling. So for people who have that perspective or have certain beliefs, what is your Christian encouragement in that realm? Someone who has walked with hundreds of people in their abuse and their transformative stories. What's the takeaways that you can give for listeners and even us?
As a recovering codependent, I have to ask myself every time, am I more dedicated to their recovery than they are? And it's easy to do that with, it's easier to answer that question with someone that you don't know but it's a lot harder to answer that question when it comes to, for instance, a child, right? One of your kids or one of your family members. And so learning, I suppose one of the biggest things that I've ever had to learn is to let things suck.
Yeah.
To learn how to be safe in myself, even when things were bad. And that learning that the outward realities are always going to be changing, right? But my inward reality, and at this point, it takes, it takes time. I try to spend about an hour in the Lord's presence, and that's not a magical time segment. It's just I try not to do petitionary prayer. I try not to do confession. I try just to be in his presence, somehow get him inside of me. And sometimes that means reading the Bible, and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes it, and I'll say for whatever prayer stuff for the end, but I need to know him and be with him in order for me to be able to keep that kind of reality that whatever happens on the outside, that, in this world you'll have trouble, right? But be of good cheer because I've overcome the world. Well, he has overcome the world, but that's something that we're not going to get to see for a while, right? I mean, that's a now and future thing, right? There's ways in which he conquers and takes care of and answers our prayers now, and there's ways in which he's not. But he has conquered my world inside of me, right? So that's really the only way I know, because it's make sure that you know that the Lord's calling you to deal with it, to work with a certain person. Because if he is not calling you to do it, it will come to nothing, and you may do more harm than good.
Yeah, that's something Ellie and I used to talk about in the beginning stages of her healing journey, where she was wrestling, what do I do? Because I don't know more stuff is being revealed. I don't know if Ellie would remember this.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Okay. I just went out for coffee once, and I told her, you have to figure out if God does want you to pursue a relationship here, because you're going to need so much supernatural complementarian.
No, I believed that I was going to save him. I believed I was going to save him.
But my encouragement to her as her older brother and as someone who had already spoken my piece and already identified how far I was willing to go in relationship with her, I told her, look, you either have to decide if you are going to go, and God is calling you to go and be in relationship and help. You need supernatural prayer and giftings that I can't help you with. You're gonna have to figure this out, and because every day you're going to be disappointed, you're going to be hurt trying to navigate this, and that's not something I can help you with. But you have to figure that out, and it's hard because she's my sister and I want to protect her. But at the same time, me as a Christian, I kind of go okay, look, if God's telling you this, then I need to shut up. But I don't know what God's telling you, so you have to figure this out, because I'm not getting any revelation here, and that's hard. It's complicated.
It is. It really is. And it's difficult too, because I feel like there's a reason why there's so many books of prayer out there, right? And it's because prayer it's such a struggle. How do you pray for somebody? When we pray for somebody, we end up confessing all their sins,
Right.
we're trying to wave some sort of faith and kill all the demons, and and there's just so many different, there's going into the courts of heaven, and there's begging, and it's like the truth of the matter is that God doesn't violate people's free will, and neither should we. And that is a horrible, hard truth. But a necessary one to, you know, to understand. So.
Well, with that being said, I think we're actually close to our timer kicking us off in about a minute and a half. So, Alice, if people want to know more about you and your story and where to get in contact with you or even read your blog, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, poemachronicles.com, and I am edging closer and closer to releasing. I have a middle grades novel coming out. I'm hoping that you guys will give me a review on Amazon. But I'll be releasing that relatively shortly here. It's called Killing Time. And but basically, it'll be announced on my blog as well. So, yeah.
Oh, how awesome. I'm afraid I'm going to interrupt because I see my timer so it doesn't abruptly kill us. Thank you so much, Alice, for your time and for your heart and for your dedication to continue to use your gifts and that God's trusted you with to come to where we're at today, 10 years later since interceding with Zach. So love you guys. And this episode's going to finish now. So we'll see you next time.
Bye. Thank you.